Hello everyone, welcome back to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where I look at the weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week, I'm going to be looking at White Mage from Opus 16, Caius from Opus 10, White Tigerlessy Qun'mi from Opus 3, Terra from Opus 16, and Noel from Opus 17. So yeah, we're having a look at the recently spoiled Noel card. Right, first up we have White Mage. It's a 3CP 7k water forward with the text, when you discard one or more cards due to summons or abilities, draw one card. This effect will only trigger during your opponent's turn. So it's quite a heavily played card at the moment in certain deck types, so namely the, ironically, Black Mage deck type, and it's quite effective, to be honest. So yeah, and because it's a generic card, it means that you can ultimately have 3 on the field, so every time you have to discard through an ability, you then get to draw 3 cards, which is crazy. So yeah, Black Waltz 3, you get to pay 0, discard 1 job Black Mage from your hand. When you do so, choose them forward, cost 3 unless your opponent controls, break it. So on your opponent's turn, you discard a card to break something, then draw 3 more cards. Maybe 3 more Black Mages, of which you can discard again, and just keep doing that as many times as you want. And the worst thing about this is that you can pay 0 and discard a job Black Mage from your hand when you do so. So you can do that regardless of not actually having a target to break. You're just discarding a card from hand to filter another card to your hand, which if you have 2 White Mages, 3 White Mages, is just silly. Alma. So you can dull Alma to draw 1 card, then discard 1 card from your hand, at which point you then get to draw another card. If you have 3 White Mages, you get to draw 3 cards. So you dull the Alma to discard a card and draw 4. Nice. Moogle. Draw 2 cards and discard 1 card from your hand. Draw 2 cards. 3 White Mages in the field, discard a card, draw 3 more cards. Silly. Ifrit, okay, right, some less meta things. Well, it's not really that meta, but less heavily played stuff. So you can choose a forward, you may discard 1 card, then Ifrit from your hand. If you do so, deal it 10,000 damage. If not, deal it 5,000. So you can hopefully build 10k something, and whilst you're at it, also cycle more cards to hand, which might be more Ifrits, or Ifritas, potentially, if you're running Ifrita kind of style deck. Alchemist, obviously these 2 cards are interplayed together, considering that they're both FFTA and the same race. I don't know what they are. But yeah, so you can put Alchemist into the break zone, discard a card from your hand. If you do so, search for 1 card of the same type, discard it and add it to your hand. So when you do this, you can stack it so that you go Alchemist, then White Mage and White Mage. But if you do Alchemist first, that means you get the card you search for rather than drawing off the White Mage. And then getting the card you would have searched with Alchemist, so then you can, use Alchemist to just search some other random card if you're looking for a specific card. So just make sure to stack as Alchemist gets you the card you want first, and then White Mages are just a nice additional bonus. Merlwib. So Merlwib can draw you 2 cards and discard 1 card from your hand, but obviously White Mage only triggers on your opponent's turn. So you make sure that, Merlwib is an EX, so you hit the EX, you get to draw 2 cards, then you discard a card, which then triggers White Mage, so then potentially get to draw 3 more cards. Polka. So, an example of why this doesn't work. So, White Mage states, when you discard 1 or more cards due to a summon or ability. So, when it says due to, it means because of. A little English lesson for you. But what this means is that in Folka's text it says, discard 1 water summon, do one of the 3 things. So you're discarding the water summon as the payment, not as the end result of. So that does not trigger White Mage. And this applies to all the other cards where basically it says discard before the colon, so the 2 little dots where it says discard 1 water summon, colon, Folka cannot, whatever. So yeah, just be mindful of things like that. So the Opus 16 Unalaska is another good example where you have to dull her, discard a card, then your opponent discards a card as well. That does not trigger White Mage. So, I mean, aside from the fact that Unalaska can only be used in your turn, so it's a bad example anyway. But basically, if the discard comes after the colon, it's good. If it comes before the colon, not so much. Right, next up we have Caius, a 4CP 9k fire forward with the text, when Caius enters the field, you may play 1 character of cost 3 or less from your hand onto the field. And when Caius is put from the field into the break zone, you select 1 character you control, put it into the break zone. So you bring something in, but he takes something away when he leaves as well. So Forza cannot be cast, so you have to play him onto the field, so the likes of Phoenix or I forget the name of the card it's meant to be paired with, but the other 5 card. Or Caius. You play Caius onto the field and then play Falls on the field, which then deals 7k to something as well. But it's nice because both of these forwards are 9k forwards that are above their, or under their cost, sorry. Alphino. So when Alphino enters the field due to your summons or abilities, you may search one character and add it to your hand. So it might be a case that you're happy for Alphino to be sacked off when Caius eventually dies as well. But yeah, ultimately Caius into Alphino, then go search yourself any character is quite nice, because Fire now plays stuff like, or the new Jin card, which is really, really good. So the fact you can go search that is quite nice, but then backups or forwards, whatever, just as long as it's a character, quite nice. Yuna. So Caius reads, when Caius is put from the field into the break zone, you have to break something. However, Yuna says, if a character is put from the field into the break zone, you may remove from the game instead. So you can use Yuna to make it so that Caius never goes into the break zone and is actually removed from the game. At which point, when Caius dies, you don't have to break a character you control. Spiritus. So let's say you've got Caius, Spiritus, and Goldes on the field, the Dark Goldes. When Caius dies, you can then put Goldes into the break zone, which then triggers Spiritus' effect of when a Dark forward other than Spiritus you control is put from the field into the break zone, choose up to 1 forward, remove from the game. This effect will only trigger once per turn. So, I mean, Goldes has his own effect of when he dies anyway, make your opponent discard a random card or minus 5k. There's a few different things you can do. But it basically means that your opponent has to try and get rid of Spiritus first before they get rid of Caius, because then you get rid of Goldes, which then does the horrible things. Now, Spiritus isn't really hard to get rid of, to be honest, but still, if they just don't have the means right then and there, it means that you can probably safely attack or block with Caius or Goldes, just to make them pay. Gutsgo. So when Gutsgo leaves the field, add all the cards removed by Gutsgo's ability to your hand, and when he enters the field or attacks, you get to remove a card from the game, and then, yeah, put on Gutsgo, basically. So, yeah, Caius dies, Gutsgo dies, you then get loads of cards to hand. Just be mindful of the fact that when Gutsgo leaves the field, you would get those cards, but if your opponent can cancel an action ability, then you don't get those cards. So if Gutsgo's been on the field for 4 or 5 turns, he's got 4 or 5 cards under him, depending on how many times he's attacked, and then Gutsgo dies, and your opponent, I don't know, maybe Ishtolas it, because that's a thing, or just Amaterasu, then obviously you won't get those cards back to hand. So just be mindful of the match type you're playing against. RG. So when RG is put from the field into the break zone, select one of the 3 following actions. Choose a forward, it gains haste until the end of the turn. Choose one forward, activate it, or choose one backup across 1 in your break zone, play it onto the field. So it could be a case of you attack with Caius knowing he's going to die, you then put RG into the break zone to then give another forward you control haste to do something, I don't know. Or just choose one forward, activate it, so it's also nice for blocking as well. So it might be a case you put 1 dull forward and Caius dies on a block, you get to put RG into the break zone to then activate the other forward you control to then safely block with that as well. Or choose a backup. So Larkicus is a nice one. So RG dies, you then get to look in your break zone. Oh look, there's a Larkicus, bring it onto the field. And even if you had 5 backups, it doesn't matter. RG put into the break zone, which triggers his effect. You can then look at Larkicus and say, yep, I've only got 4 backups, play onto the field. And then Larkicus will get to remove something for as long as Larkicus is there. Just bear in mind that Larkicus will not reactivate. Chaos, so this is a weird one, and it's also a dark card, so it's kind of hard to get into the break zone, but when RG dies, you could play Chaos onto the field, and when Chaos enters the field, choose one forward of cost 5 or more in your break zone. You may pay X when you do so. If it's cost X, play it onto the field. So it might be a case that Caius dies in a block, to then sack off RG, to then bring back Chaos, you then pay 5, to then play a 5 cost backup from, or 5 cost forward, sorry, from your break zone onto the field. Just, yeah, it's just bit costly, so that's the kind of problem there. And it's also kind of hard to get a dark card into the break zone. There are ways, but yeah, just not great. And then also Chaos does have a kind of cool ability to be able to pay 3 dull and remove Chaos from the game. Choose one character opponent controls, remove that from the game. So maybe you just want to remove your opponent's Althea, or you know, their I forgot the name of this, the monster, the water one, wind one, Atomos, that's one, or Tross, because it's water as well. But yeah, just a nice way to be able to remove a character, which is quite good. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Rampare. So, yeah, I mean, Fire Lightning doesn't have amazing 11 forwards, but there are some more decent ones coming up in Opus 17, sorry. And there are some fun junky things you can play along with it. But yeah, ultimately, Caius dies, Rampare dies, and you could be playing something out of element, so you actually might play the 9 CP Shantota out of nowhere, which would definitely be a surprise. But either way, it's just something for your opponent to have to consider. If Caius dies, what are you going to do in response? Trapdoor. So Caius enters, he can actually play a Trapdoor onto the field, and if you've got 3 lightning backups, he then also a forward, which isn't too bad. But then when Trapdoor dies, you get to choose one for your opponent controls and break it. So that means if Caius dies, you can then sack off Trapdoor to then break something else as well. So it might be a case that your opponent's willing to trade out one of their forwards for Caius, but then actually you get to break 2 things, one with Caius, one with Trapdoor. Graham, so yeah, this is okay, but ultimately it's the reason it isn't great is because Graham, you have to play him with only Earth backups to play him onto the field, which means that he would be your 4th Earth backup. So in Fire Earth, kind of awkward, but Earth does have some decent ways of being able to play him onto the field anyway. So using something like Luca and then having Caius, because he's not restricted by element, you can play Caius onto the field and then play Graham on the field, at which point you get to deal 9k something, which ain't too bad. Althea, yeah, I mean, Caius into the field, bring Althea into the field, activate something, that's nice. And then also you can use Althea as a form of protection for Caius if you want to, again, because when he dies, obviously you'd break something. So Althea him back to hand so he doesn't die, doesn't break something, and then you can replay him onto the field and then replay Althea. So it's kind of a funny little combo. Just bear in mind that if they kill him immediately, then Althea will die if she is a dull. Next up, we have White Tiger C Qun'mi. So it's a 3CP 6k first strike, where when 1 or more forwards you control are chosen by your opponent's summons. Its effect is cancelled if your opponent doesn't pay 3. So it's, yeah, basically your forwards have to be chosen by a summon. So if it's a summon that just deals damage across the board, so something like the Opus 16, 15 Hecatonchire, I can't remember which one it is now, that wouldn't trigger White Tiger C, but ultimately any summons are targeting it, they have to pay 3, which is actually quite a lot, so yeah, they have to be mindful of that. Lugay, so yeah, when you play White Tiger, you then can put Lugay into the break zone to then give White Tiger plus 2000 and Brave, so then you have a an 8k Brave first strike Ice Forward, which is actually pretty good because Ice doesn't have too much of either of those things, so having that on a forward, which is also kind of hard to hit with summons, is quite nice. Cecil, talked about this before, but I'll talk about it again. Yeah, so let's say your opponent wants to target one of your forwards with a summon. They have to pay 3 for White Tiger, but then they also have to pay 2 for Cecil as well. So they have to pay 5 for a summon just to be able to hit, which is pretty rank. Now, White Tiger only protects your forwards, where Cecil protects both your forwards and, or I think it's just characters in general, yeah. So it can protect your monsters and your backups as well. But still, if your opponent wants to get rid of Cecil or White Tiger, they have to pay a lot with their summons to do so. Sid Randall. So playing summons is going to be hard for them because they got White Tiger on the field, and now they won't have their entry effects from their forwards either. So it means that your opponent is starting to run out of options of how they can actually kill your forwards. Basically, they have to rely on either action abilities or S abilities, or on attack effects as well. So yeah, a lot of cards don't actually run that many action abilities anymore because they want the instant payoff of play the thing, get the thing. So yeah, having Sid Randall there, meaning that they don't get that entry effect, and then they want to cast a summon, they have to pay the additional 3. Life can become quite awkward for them quite quickly. Flandit. So they want to cast summons, they then have to pay the additional 3, but then they can't pay the 1 to make it so their forwards can't attack or block with Flandit. So it's a good old-fashioned tax deck, really, isn't it? But yeah, just having Flandit and White Tiger means that your opponent has to basically set aside a lot of CP just to be able to do things, which can become very problematic. And, you know, you could probably work some wind in there as well. So you've got something like White Tiger, Lassie, and Cecil, and Flandit. So there's all these payments that your opponent's going to have to pay just to be able to do, well, anything. Charlotte. So it might be a case that they really want to get rid of White Tiger, C Qun'mi, or Cecil, but they have to get rid of Charlotte first. And it's also quite nice because a lot of effects that people don't realise might state just choose one forward, it gains the thing. So let's go with Belias from Opus 2. Choose one forward, it gains plus 1000, haste, first strike, and you get to draw a card. What your opponent may not realise is that it just says choose one forward. So actually it can choose, well, from their perspective, it can choose their opponent's forwards. So your Charlotte, at which point they would have to choose Charlotte. If they don't then pay the 3, that Belias then gets cancelled. So if they were trying to do it just to draw themselves a card, there would now be no point, because they would have to pay the 3 for it to not be cancelled, to then give your Charlotte plus 1000 and first strike and haste, just for them to get a card. Yeah, unless they are severely screwed in what they've got in hand, I don't think they'll be doing that, but quite funny. Terra. So the cost required for your opponent to cast summons increases by 1. Simple as that. It just means that all your summons, or all their summons, just cost 1 extra. So it's not even a case of just pay the 1 extra or it gets cancelled. They just have to pay the extra 1, which is a really interesting ability. And I think if that were printed on a different card these days, it would be played a lot more. But because it's an Opus 1 card and it's not particularly strong, yeah, not going to get played. But it's still a really cool effect. I really like that. And that combined with White Tiger means your opponent's having to pay an additional 4 to be able to cast a summon that targets something. And yeah, just horrible. Celestia, similar sort of thing. When a nice character you control is chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, choose up to 1 character, dull it and freeze it. So, you know, you can also dull and freeze their backups as well. So it might be a case they cast a summon to try and kill White Tiger, which point they then pay the 3. You can then also just choose the other backup that they might not have paid with to dull and freeze that as well. So your opponent has to take into account the fact that even if they are paying the 3 to break White Tiger, they're going to be losing a lot of their offensive mechanisms as well. Summoner, they pay the 3 to cast a summon, and then Summoner cancels it anyway. And I really like this card because you only have to pay 1 ice, and Summoner doesn't even have to be active. All you've got to do is just pay the 1, put Summoner into the break zone. A lot of people forget about this card, and when they see it dull, they think, I won't be able to cancel it, it's fine, thinking that Summoner has to dull itself. It doesn't. So yeah, I mean, you can ultimately have Summoner active and dull it to generate the CP, and then put it in the break zone. That does work, but it doesn't have to be dull to be able to use this ability. Right, Terra. So, yeah, just a really weird card to be honest, but a 3 CP 7k Earth forward with the text, the category 6 backups you control can produce CP of any element. Then you can pay a fire until the end of the turn. Terra gains plus 2000 power and haste. An ice, choose 1 character, freeze it. Choose, pay a water, choose 1 character, dull it, or pay a fire, ice, and water, and a dull to choose 1 forward and break it. So yeah, quite a bit of versatility there, but really strange. I really like it though. So Tyro, yeah, ultimately it's an Earth, so it's got all the multi-element it'll ever need. So just having Tyro there, just to be able to, oh, I feel like dulling something, oh, I feel like freezing something, whatever. Giving Terra haste, I guess, is all right, but ultimately Tyro is one of your multi-elements, so you'd only really be giving her haste if you wanted to then use the immediate break effect, which means you'd actually need to pay 2 fire, an ice, and a water, which in Earth you'd basically need all of your backups to be multi-element. Which, funnily enough, you can do with your Moogle FFCC. All your Moogle backups can generate any element. That's pretty good, to be honest. I mean, all the class whatever Moogles can generate various different elements anyway. But being on Earth, it means that you can have stuff like Tyro and Shantoto as well, just to be able to either protect yourself or just to be able to generate the elements. So yeah, having Moogle FFCC to then generate everything, you can then use Terra as a effect to immediately gain haste and then break something as well, or just dull and freeze a load of things, whatever. Archangel TT. So when Archangel TT enters the field, choose 1 dull forward depending controls. At the end of your opponent's next turn, break it. So you can just pay the 1 water to make a forward dull, and then play Archangel TT to then choose a forward, and it will then break. Not the most effective means of breaking something, but still, it means Archangel TT is ultimately there to block the forward the following turn as well, and it is a break for, you know, not too much, which is not bad, I guess. Just a way to be able to use Terra again. Cactuar. So yeah, using Terra, you're probably going to have a lot of multi-element backups, at which point Cactuar is a fantastic card as well, because choose 1 forward, break it. If the cost to cast Cactuar is paid with CP of 2 or less different elements, Cactuar does your opponent damage as well. So to avoid that point of damage, pay, you know, 3 elements or more. So Earth, Water, and Ice, maybe. Fusoya. Yeah, great cards together. So when Fusoya enters the field, select the following actions from the top. Sorry, text is kind of small on my laptop. Select the following actions from the top to bottom up to the same number of elements other than water as the cost you paid to cast Fusoya. Wow, that is just a mouthful. But basically, yeah, every element you pay additional to water, you then get to go 1 element, 2 element, 3 element, whatever. And if you're playing Terra and you got some multi-element backups, and then means you can potentially get to, I don't know, the 3rd or maybe even the 4th of Fusoya's effects, which are actually pretty good. And if you happen to have, like, I don't know, a full Moogle lineup with the Moogle FFCC card, then it means that you can use all of Fusoya's effects, which is not bad. Kefka is like the only 6 backup in the game. So yeah, Kefka and Terra, and then maybe you can be an Earth Fire and have some of the 6 fire backups. So Shadow, Interceptor, and Edgar, but at which point they can all generate every element anyway, so not too bad. And you can actually use the fire to then give Terra haste as well, which isn't too bad, and utilize that to then be able to use the remainder of her effects to then break something as well. Finally, we have Noel. So an Opus 17 card, which was spoiled a couple of weeks ago now. So he's a 2 CP 5k wind forward. Oh, we love those, don't we? And with the text, when Noel attacks, you may remove Noel from the game. If you do so, at the beginning of your next main phase 1, play Noel onto the field. When Noel enters the field due to an ability of card name Noel, select one of the 3 following actions. Choose one character of cost 4 or more, break it. Noel deals your opponent 1 point of damage, or search for 1 forward and add it to your hand, and at damage 3, Noel gains haste. So yeah, at damage 3, he becomes a very good card, so your opponent needs to deal with it then and there, similar to the Opus 16 Zidane. Otherwise, he's going to start just throwing abilities around, so he can break something, which is very strong, and that's a character of 4 or more, so that's backups or forwards or monsters. I don't think, yeah, no monsters really, but yeah, ultimately be able to break backups and forwards is just a massive pain in fact to keep on recurring, and then obviously deal a point of damage repeatedly as well. Awful. And then personally, I think this is the strongest effect, to search for 1 forward and add it to your hand. That's an additional card you're getting basically every turn, and it's also the forward you always want it to be. So you know if it's a 4 CP, I mean, this is assuming you've got enough backups. I mean, it's a 4 CP, you know you're going to be able to play it because you're going to draw 2 cards that same turn as well. So yeah, it's just really, really powerful. And to do that potentially every turn if your opponent can't get rid of Noel, that's just rank. So Kadaj, this is kind of amusing because both Noel and Kadaj will not be on your field during your opponent's turn. So Kadaj obviously removes himself from the game at the end of your turn, whereas Noel will remove himself when he attacks. So he'll remove himself, end of your turn, Kadaj then removes himself. At the end of your opponent's turn, Kadaj comes back, potentially dulls something out the way, or, you know, remove some cards from your opponent's break zone, and then Noel enters in your main phase and you get to search something or whatever. Ultimately, it's just quite a funny combo of 2 forwards and never there on your opponent's turn, but always there on your turn. Luso. So yeah, this is kind of strange. So there's a lot of, well, there's a few wind cards now, which are kind of small, but they can actually deal points of damage. So Luso and Noel are 2 really cool cards together, because let's say you've also got the, is it Opus 8 Yuri? No, I think it's before then, I can't remember now. But Yuri that has every element. It means that Luso's effect of, when Luso attacks, if there are 5 or more different elements among the forwards you control, Luso deals your opponent 1 point of damage. That Yuri just fulfills that prerequisite off the bat. So Luso can attack, deal a point of damage. Noel re-enters the field, deal a point of damage. You got 2 little forwards that dealing points of damage wherever they go. Golbez! So it could be a case of you play Golbez onto the, or Golbez dies, sorry. You can then play maybe Luso, or Noel and other things as well. And Noel coming in, potentially having haste, going to combat, and then, you know, removing yourself from the game that following turn, knowing that you're going to be able to deal opponent damage, but also search for other forwards as well. You know, just a really, really good way just to be able to monopolize on Golbez dying and getting more things onto the field that are going to be just horrible, because it might be a case that your opponent's got a fair few forwards. You've got, well, at least 3 forwards now. Noel just attacks, removes himself from the game. Now if your opponent is just going to take a point of damage and potentially die, yeah, just having all these forwards that can just swing and deal, you know, points of damage without actually having to, well, actually dealing the point of damage, so to speak, is quite strong. And Golbez is a great way to be able to search this boy out and play him onto the field. Blinker. So let's make it so he can attack twice. The first time you actually let the damage go through, deal a point of damage, and the second time he then removes himself from the game and then comes back in and deals another point of damage. Ritz. So again, having it so that you can just search forward is actually really, really powerful. So it might be a case that you use Noel to search for Ritz, who then comes to you, who you then have in hand, you can then play, potentially not be able to be blocked, has haste, deal a point of damage to your opponent. Or it might be that you get the March to play the March to then get Ritz out of the breaks and play her onto the field, and Noel comes in as well. Just really, I think the fire wind combos with Noel would actually be a lot of fun. Well, I say a lot of fun, horrible, but effective. Because there's going to be lots of ways to be able to deal points of damage that either can't be blocked, or just from cards like Luso and Noel where they don't actually have, aren't actually dealing points of damage to your opponent through an attack, even though Noel's technically is through his entry ability. You know what I mean. Yeah, just lots of hasty fun, which deals points of damage and just searches cards, and yeah, nasty. Also, risk it when she attacks, she gets to reactivate 3 cards, 3 backups, which is strong as well. Edge. So, yeah, I mean, one of the... ninjas don't require edge to be good, because, you know, if you have enough of 2 particular elements and just some spice of another element, then you're fine, really. But sometimes you just really want that edge to be able to either just nuke stuff with shurikens or be able to color fix. And Noel being able to just remove himself from the game, and then when he re-enters, search you that edge to then get that edge onto the field, then start paying your ninjas for 1 CP cheaper and for any element would be really, really effective. I mean, ninjas these days can actually just run a decent 4 engine using things like Theodore, Hooded Man, and Cecil. But I think Noel's maybe worth putting in there just because of the fact he can search you the edge, or search you the Sukinoa, or search you the Zangets, whoever you need to look for, because they're your win conditions and might just be able to combo nicely into, you know, because that's the way ninjas work. But the words, that's the way ninjas work the best, is by having the right forward, playing the forward, doing lots of things at once. Scholar. This is quite amusing. So it might be a case that all the forwards that you wanted to search with Noel are now in your break zone. Play Scholar. Put it from your break zone into the deck. Obviously, you have to put the top card from your deck into the break zone. Might have to be a worthy sacrifice, but then at least you know when Noel re-enters, he will be searching that card you put back into a deck, which is really, really good. Ilua. So yeah, being able to just constantly search yourself an Ilua to hand, to then play, or to use her effect to then give Noel haste, because he'll have re-entered that field. So this is something you need to bear in mind, is that if you're not damaged 3 or more, Noel won't have haste, so he won't be able to attack the turn he re-enters through his own effect. So he's kind of got that delay on his effect. But if Noel re-enters to then search you an Ilua, to then use Ilua's S, he'll then regain haste. He can then attack and do the thing and keep searching Ilua's, whilst making your forward, all your forwards gain haste, all your opponent's forwards losing power, and just, yeah, quite nasty. And basically this is just for any card that has an S ability, a decent S ability. Using Noel to be able to search that S and then use it immediately when it re-enters is a scary prospect, especially if you play the forward that turn, then immediately uses S ability. So yeah, just having it there, waiting, horrible, but just playing it and then immediately using that S, even worse. Orin. So it might be a case that you either want to find some protection or just want protection for Noel, because ultimately, if Noel comes down, your opponent probably wants to get rid of him pretty sharpish, because he does have some nasty effects. So having the protection there is going to be necessary. So having something like Orin or Charlotte, or maybe even Phil Thanos, who knows. But yeah, ultimately being able to just protect Noel so his effects keep on consistently triggering, probably worth it. And there we go, folks, that is it. Opus 17 is, we're getting a lot of good spoilers now, and I'm really excited for some of the things I've seen. There's a lot of really cool Final Fantasy 11 cards, actually, like Afmao and the dual name Nyejing and Ovyang, however you say their names. And then the FFTA cards as well, the dual horns, they look really, really cool. So there's some really cool effects out there. But the thing on everyone's mind is bans. I wonder if they're going to announce any bans anytime soon. It tends to be around about the beginning of an opus that they do so. But I guess we'll see. There's been a lot of tourneys on recently, and I think they just want people to play it out just to kind of get the lay of the land, see all these events and say, right, yeah, definitely, this card is being abused. You know which one I'm on about. And just get rid of it. So yeah, exciting stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky. See you in the next video.